Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the final edition of our Conscious Capitalism Rochester and Syracuse chapter co-hosted virtual conference, The Healing Force of Business. Had a lot of really exciting conversations throughout this month, and we're really grateful to have you all here with us today. Hopefully, one of the ways that we're hoping to wrap up is really to give you a few case studies on what healing organizations look like, how we can start to bring them into our own companies, whether that's at a smaller entrepreneurial kind of social entrepreneurship type of a level, whether it's in a larger organization and what kinds of things that involves. Either way, we have a really illustrious panel, really excited to share with you some of their insights and experiences. And as always, please feel free to throw any questions you have for any of them specifically or for the panel as a whole into the chat. And if it works into the conversation, I'll certainly try to work it in. Otherwise, we do have about a half an hour at the end that'll be reserved for all of your questions. So please do put those in the chat as soon as they come up. But today we do have with us, we have Tom Bachmann from Paychex. He's a culture shaping manager. We have Mubarak Bashir, who is with Greyston Open Hiring, and he's the regional director. James Norman from the Rochester Monroe Anti-Poverty Initiative's Employment Action Group. Tina Paradiso from Imprinting Lives at Imprintable Solutions, and Kim Townsend from Loretto, and really, as I mentioned, a broad spectrum of healing organizations, and hopefully something that each one of you might be able to learn something and apply. But before we get started, I just wanted to very briefly thanks to these are the Rochester partners. So our visionary partners in Rochester are Accelerate, Clean Craft, and the Bonadillo Group. And we have sustaining partners with Benefit Link, Home Leasing, Nazareth College, SWBR, 2 Point Capital Management, and Grit Health. And they're really always been supporting us, but especially to be able to put on a conference like this. Couldn't do it without their help, and really grateful. We also, as I mentioned earlier, have been partnering with the brand new Syracuse chapter. They have a few partners of their own. At Loretto, Chobani, Strategic Financial Services, Gilroy, Kernan, and Gilroy, Mohawk Global, and the Center for Corporation for Economic Opportunity. And so we're really grateful to have that partnership as well, especially when we're in a virtual environment. I think we always have a regional economy in a lot of ways, but certainly when we're in a virtual environment, it's even easier. No travel time necessary. So grateful to everyone from the Syracuse chapter that's joining. For those that are joining us for the first time, may not be familiar with conscious capitalism, there's a whole number of books that you can read. The very first one was called Firms of Endearment from Raj Sisodia, who was a keynote a few weeks ago during our conference. His latest book is called The Healing Organization. But what all started this conscious capitalism movement was a book called Firms of Endearment, and keyed in on 4 key tenets of what came to be known as conscious capitalism. The first was that they had a higher purpose beyond just making profits. You need profits to survive. You got to keep the lights on. I think many of us are maybe feeling some of those pressures now more than ever. But at the same time, having a purpose beyond just profit can make us more resilient. It can increase our employee engagement and of course the impact that we're having on the community. There's more and more investors that want to be conscious investors. There's more and more consumers that want to spend their dollars, in alignment with their values. And so, that higher purpose becomes even more important. There's also a stakeholder orientation. So rather than prioritizing the needs of the stockholders, these companies try to balance the needs of the customers, the community, the employees, the environment. They really recognize how in the long run, this whole ecosystem really surrounds and supports them, and they need a healthy ecosystem for the long-term sustainability and health of their business as well. They also have conscious leadership. So hopefully that's why many of you are here today. The leaders have to grow for the organization to grow. And so leaders have to continue to grow and evolve their own consciousness in order to lead a conscious organization. And that requires being a servant leader, being values driven, and really embodying the purpose of the organization as well. Last but certainly not least is a conscious culture. So these organizations, they value in a very holistic sense the well-being of all of their employees. And so as they are building their culture, they want to create a holistic sense of well-being. And also, as we'll be talking about today, really a sense of healing, healing past hurts, healing some things that are going on in society. Really, we believe that capitalism and business has to be a part of that positive change if we're going to create really a lasting societal transformation. Hopefully we can talk with some of our leaders here today about the ways that can happen here locally in both Rochester and Syracuse, across upstate New York, but hopefully around the country. And really our vision with our conscious capitalism chapters is if this conscious capitalism movement, it's been shown inside of a company to have positive impacts on the bottom line. These companies grow more quickly because they have more engaged employees, more loyal customers, more thriving communities that they're a part of. What if we as a region came to be known as a more conscious place to do business? We could impact our regional bottom line. It could be a regional talent attraction retention strategy. And so that's really our goal. And hopefully what we're here today is really to just continue creating that learning community. As I mentioned, this is the 5th edition of our virtual conference. So we have had a few in the past where we talked last week about building a more inclusive entrepreneurial ecosystem. The week prior about how racism is a public health crisis and why it should also be a business imperative. We had Raj come talk about the Healing Organization and give us a keynote about his latest thoughts on the next evolution of conscious capitalism. And very first conference panel was kicking off with healing the upstate economy with some local chambers of commerce. And so listening really to all of these different perspectives, you can go on our website at consciouscapitalismroc.org to watch the videos or listen to the podcast to any of these panels. But I without further ado, wanted to leave the rest of our time here today really to talk about what we came here to talk about is really creating those healing allow for employee engagement. They allow for thriving, healthy communities, and also a really robust, thriving, healthy, all stakeholder relationships. And again, hopefully giving you some case studies on what that might look like inside of your organization, different sized organizations we have on the panel today, different ways to get involved, different ways to certainly take action. So I wanted to start our panel really by talking first with Kim Townsend, who is the president and CEO at Loretto, also the author of Life Circle Leadership, and was recently honored by McKnight's as a 2020 Women of Distinction Hall of Honor inductee, which recognizes executive level women who have made significant contributions to the senior living and skilled nursing field. So first, thank you so much for joining us today, Kim.
Thank you so much, Andrew. I'm so excited to be here, and hello to my fellow panelists. Really excited to be part of this important conversation.
Well, we're really excited to have you with us for many reasons, but one being that as the president and CEO of Loretto, you've certainly in a lot of ways been on the front lines of this COVID pandemic. You look remarkably well rested, or at least you're well caffeinated, considering everything that's been going on. What are some of the things that you learned about yourself and about Loretto going through this COVID pandemic?
Great. Well, so a little bit about Loretto, founded in 1926 on 3 principles: innovation, partnerships, and a desire to solve social problems. So you fast forward to today, we're about a $240 million business. We have 19 sites across central New York, and we're the 4th largest health system. We are in the post-acute sector, so you're right. We are on the front line with skilled nursing, short-term rehabilitation, senior housing, assisted living, PACE-managed care program. And so we have had a very, very good window to both the best that people bring forward in a crisis, as well as the more challenging aspects. But I think the things that we've learned as an organization, really, we're just affirming our faith in mankind, which is, first of all, I have been incredibly inspired by the lengths that frontline caregivers will go to keep themselves, their families, their coworkers, and the people that they care for safe and happy and engaged. So, you read in the newspaper about the flight of healthcare workers from the healthcare organizations, and we did not see that. And I think that is just in part because of the tremendous commitment that our frontline workers have to their residents, to their co-workers, and to the organization. And I would say the other thing that has been a real lesson to me, and really I think I knew this in my heart, but it's been manifested over and over again, is just the incredible generosity and kindness of the Central New York community, and the incredible patience of families, many of whom have not seen their loved ones across our facilities. So we care for 10,000 people a year, and 63% of those people are Medicaid eligible. So the other day we had a family coming for their first visit in 5.5 months, and they drove from Georgia. They had their 30-minute visit. They got back in their car and they drove back home to Georgia. And so I think what this crisis has really shown me is the incredible goodness of humanity and the way people will show up for each other in times that are hard.
Yeah, wow. Thanks for sharing that, and certainly for all of the hard work to you and your whole team. I can only imagine the stress that puts on an individual, also the great weight that gets put on, you know, your team when they are caring for people oftentimes who, you know, maybe their families aren't able to visit them, especially, you know, with everything going on, and whether that's geography, whether that's you know, especially in this time during COVID. I'm curious because whenever there's that great strain and great stress, it can certainly be stressed on the culture of the organization. I'm curious if there's anything that you did previously that, you know, your culture was better able to be resilient during this time, or any kind of ways that you prepared that ended up working out well, and the way that kind of conscious culture, so to speak, impacted your ability to withstand, and certainly still ongoing, but withstand so far, you know, the pandemic and the stresses that brings.
So the foundation of the Loretto culture is the concept of being part of the Loretto family. So we always say we're not only a family with the people that we care for, but we are a family of caregivers with each other. And so what do families do in hard times? They support each other. So one of the basic premises that we had when we saw just widespread unemployment across our area, which is a highly impoverished area to begin with, was that so many of our employees had family members who were now unemployed. So as an organization, we made the conscious decision that we were not going to furlough any employee. So we had programs that shut down, that really we could have furloughed people, but we knew that that was going to place an extreme economic hardship. But even in spite of the fact that we didn't do that, we still saw incredible needs. So we've done 40,000 meals here at Loretto for employees who are working long shifts. We've done over 400 emergency food bags for people whose children are home from school and had less than a day's worth of food in their home. We've given out 70,000 free diapers to employees, many of them grandparents raising their grandchildren. We have 200 people who are in our prenatal program. We're tracking these people because access to healthcare is so challenging. We've got a deal with Lyft where we help employees get to and from work because public transportation was curtailed. So I've really seen this as an opportunity to pull together as a family and to really evidence what we speak, which is we are part of the Loretto family. And I think that our employees have just come up huge because they really see that tangible evidence of our love and care for them and our great appreciation for the work that they're doing.
That's just phenomenal. Thank you for sharing. Well, mostly thank you for doing all of that, but thank you for sharing it as well. I mean, I think that a lot of organizations talk about the family, or a lot of organizations, say our people are our most important asset, but it's a lot harder to do that when you're in a crisis. And so that's really speaks volumes about your organization. Hopefully made a huge impact. I can only imagine that the impact that it had on some of those the lives of some of those employees and their families as well. So really a lot to be proud of. And one of the things that I wanted to also kind of ask of you, because you had so many of those essential workers, and I think too often in our culture we've undervalued those essential workers. Certainly you've been a testament to valuing their contributions, but in a societal sense, sometimes they don't get that either respect or recognition or pay or whatever the case may be. But one of the things that you wrote about recently, kind of in accepting your Women of Distinction honor, was talking about advocacy, talking about advocating for your industry, and writing a little bit about how we can't go back. In a lot of ways, we probably don't want to, but we can only go forward, and hopefully forward toward a more just, equitable, inclusive society. And I'd be really curious to hear, in terms of your advocacy. You talked a lot about how advocacy, is a verb, it's an action. What are some of the priorities maybe that you and Loretto are tackling? And then what are some of the other ways that you see that business leaders, across the spectrum can have a more positive impact on society? What should they be advocating for?
So we know that essential workers, particularly essential health workers, tend to be some of the lowest paid individuals in our country. And for Loretto, 65% of our frontline caregivers are Black and brown women, women of color. So as a leadership team, we have made the decision that we are actively promoting as an organization a platform of anti-racism and anti-oppression. And that includes all forms of oppression, whether it's differential treatment of Black and brown people by our criminal justice system, or environmental racism, or opportunity gaps in education or wages. And so recently we partnered with 1199 SEIU on their Strike for BLM Day, and we held a solidarity event here at Loretto across our system. And what was interesting was, I think the responses we received really reflect where we are as a country. So we received wonderful emails and texts of support from our employees and from others, but likewise, we had other people that said they hoped our organization failed, they hoped nobody would ever come here, and we were labeled Marxist, which is kind of a throwback to the 50s a little bit. So I guess what we've chosen to do at Loretto is really employ a multi-generational strategy in terms of how we work with and develop all of our talent. And our theory is that if we provide people with a living wage and great benefits and opportunities for education and advancement, hope for the future, that is going to have a tremendous impact on the trajectory of their families for generations to come. And so I would encourage, that's what Loretto is doing. I think each business leader has to assess where they are in their journey and what is appropriate in their environment. But I would encourage business leaders to lean in a little bit and consider ways that their organizations can have an impact in their communities, whether it is a day of caring, where you go out in the community and you serve in some of our human service agencies or whatever that may be. But we were very pleased to be able to stand with our employees in solidarity for those things that are most important to them.
Thank you so much. And really, I wanted to it makes a great transition for us to talk about, you know, such a large company having a huge impact on the healing, really, of as you're mentioning, you know, intergenerational, you know, impacts and traumas and things that have happened, you know, societally and systemically. But then also now looking at an example, because there's probably many listeners out there that are working for smaller organizations. So I wanted to turn now to Tina Paradiso from Imprintable Solutions. Imprintable Solutions, Inc. lifts up other branding and marketing efforts through printing, promotional products, and decorated apparel. They've been grown and evolved from wholesale distribution, adding manufacturing, and going from being a service to being of service. And that's mostly through their Imprinting Lives program, which is a learn-to-earn experience for young people in Rochester labeled at risk due to poverty, homelessness, gang affiliation, not being in school, pregnant or parenting, differently abled, any other number of reasons. But Tina Paradiso is on with us today, and I'm just really grateful for her leadership throughout this time, because it's always been you know, really needed in our community. But Tina, I'd be curious, you know, through your business, I know you've owned the business since 2013. That the Imprinting Lives program is a little bit newer. What inspired you to bring this Imprinting Lives program to Imprintable Solutions?
Well, thank you for having me, number one. I think the inspiration came from, we started a couple years ago with one intern, and our first intern, he was affiliated, he was completely disconnected, and within 9 months, he actually became an entrepreneur, started his own business, had his first corporate customer, and then he was shot and killed. And when that happened, we had other interns come in, but the driving force was, you know, we really wanted to drive it home a little harder and ask the tougher questions and advocate more and add to this space, so that all of our young people get the opportunity to do their heavy lifting in a safe space. And can we just drove really a lot harder after that happened. And I think the other piece to that is part of my life story as well, coming from a space of, you know, being homeless for a year myself when I was a young person at the same age that they are. So putting those two things together has actually propelled us even harder and further, and faster, and yeah, that was my inspiration.
Well, I've heard the story certainly many times, but it's always an inspiration to hear, you know, how you've really taken that and really trying to pay it forward. And I know that you're doing it for all the right reasons, but at the same time, you're also a testament to this curious fact about conscious capitalism, is that when, you know, you are doing things that aren't directly, you know, focused on the bottom line, you're not just focused on making as much money as possible. You're focused on the long-term impact that you're having, you know, on your employees, on your community. That's really played a part for you, you know, in terms of some of the success that your business has actually had. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So one of the interesting that happens, and I talk a lot about the energy in the universe, right? You can't do things by accident. You know, we are for-profit businesses. We're a small business. We certainly have a budget. We certainly have, you know, sales that we try to hit. We certainly have production to do and the whole 9 yards, just as every small business has to do. One of the interesting things, though, is this energy in the universe that I talk about. We end up, through being a social enterprise, having the opportunity to acquire new business. And on top of that, with our production is completely led by interns who are now on the payroll of Imprintable Solutions, who've moved into supervisory roles, who have become master embroiderers. And it's run completely by all interns, the production. Supervision, production, ordering, quality, everything. And our throughput, our gross profit has actually grown. We started prior to the program, we were at about, and I'll share this, I don't mind sharing this, we were at about 34%. We're at 60% throughput right now. And that's with an entirely young, starting with an untrained team. And what happens is they learn from each other. I have one rule, and it's respect, right? And that starts with respect of self. And then you go respect of your team, respect of the process, respect of the business, respect of the customers. And that trickles down. And a lot of our interns, the longer they're here, they become mentors to the other interns. They talk about quality, they talk about processes. They actually have rearranged the production area 3 times to make it more efficient for them. Who am I to sit in the office and go back and say, I think this should be here, 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 and here, when I'm not the one running the production full time. So they make the executive decisions back there. Where is a machine going to go? When does it need maintenance? How are we going to keep track of inventory? Do we put together a supply list so that we can keep track of things? And they're all developing this. I might drop a hint. I might say, hey, have you thought about? But at the end of the day, they're the ones who are coming up with the processes to streamline. And then what happens is that profitability increases. I have the opportunity, because a lot of our interns come to us through programs and organizations like Center for Youth, Rochester Works, Urban League, Rochester Rehabilitation, Monroe. So they come to us on an internship, and if they're not done or ready for their next step, we employ them. They come under our employment. And what happens is the more profitability there is, the more young people I'm able to hire, so that they're able to move to their next steps in a safe place, being able to do their heavy lifting.
And I've seen that in practice. I've seen some of the evolution and the growth of some of your young people, and it's incredible to see, even just month by month, the kind of strides that are made when they have that kind of safe environment. I think that there's probably a lot of people in the community. Maybe there's less skeptics listening on this call, but they tend to be more the purpose-driven conscious capitalism folks. But even so, I think there's, many people that kind of cast off the people that you're employing as, unmotivated or any number of things that they would say that, we don't want to employ these folks. So I'd be curious if you could kind of give us a pitch almost of why more organizations should try something like this out in terms of expanding where they're looking for employees, and maybe any advice that you'd give to them if they were interested in starting this journey.
So this is where I get on my soapbox. I do hear from some other small business owners, oh, it's just so hard to find good people, or I just need, or I just want, or I can't find. At the end of the day, we have a whole pool of young people who are striving. Their life experiences may look different than your life experience. However, they want the same things. We all want shelter. We all want food. We all want to be safe. We all want to be able to provide for our families and take care of our families. We all want the same things, right? And is a motivating factor. I have some of the most brilliant minds here. I have artists we're working on getting scholarships for them. I have young people that want to start their own business and are watching and learning and asking and doing, and they're going to get there. I have wonderful mathematicians. So everybody that comes in here has a gift, right? And we're all given a gift. And it's how we choose to use that gift. And here we seek out, what is it you're good at? What is it you like to do? Some are good at processes, some are good at production, some are good at quality. And they end up self-identifying where they want to be in the company, right? And when that happens, it actually does balance itself out. I know I've heard people say, well, you can't do that. Well, I am doing it, and it is working, and we don't have a gap in production, and we do meet our customers' needs. I would say, as a leader, it's very fulfilling for me to watch my young people go to the next step or overcome a barrier, or watch them work through a process and have that aha moment. And once they have that aha moment, then they're starting to strive harder and faster. And hey, and then, there's a huge sense of pride with all my young people, right? They don't want to ask for the help because they're resilient and they're tough young people, right? And then they get to the point where they say, you know what, it's okay for me to say, hey, can I get a little bit of help here? And to watch that process happen is amazing as well. So, for other entrepreneurs and small business owners, it is rewarding as far as the feels, right? You have that feel good moment. It is rewarding as far as profitability because, again, we've been able to hire. So I'll give you a little story. At the beginning of the pandemic, we had 7 interns. We now have 17 under our roof. So there's a huge need, right? And again, with the energy with the universe, our production has actually increased over 12%. So as we bring on a new person, we get more orders, we add a shift, and we continue to grow that way. So are there risks? Heartbreak, right? If something happens, that hurts. But the rewards are watching our young people, who are gonna push our economy forward, move forward, right? Get over transportation barriers, get stable housing, able to provide for their family, move into, if they want to, higher education or the trades or start their own business, or all of that is a huge motivating factor, I think, for us as a team, because we all want to see each other succeed here.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. And one of the things that I think that you've certainly followed many of these principles, maybe not directly, but what's called open hiring, and that'll kind of lead us into a conversation that I'd like to welcome Mubarak Bashir into the conversation. And Mubarak is the regional director for Greyston Open Hiring. Now, Greyston is a bakery down in Yonkers, New York. They've been practicing this open hiring thing for more than 35 years, where there's no interviews, no background checks, no drug tests. You basically put your name on a waiting list, and when they're ready to hire, you're up. It sounds crazy, but like I said, they've been doing it for more than 35 years now. And for many of you, if you've never heard of Greyston, if you've ever had Ben & Jerry's ice cream and that had brownies in it, you've at least eaten their products. So pretty neat thing. But what's even potentially more exciting is, after all this time, they've learned a few things, and they would like to expand and scale this model. And that's where Mubarak comes in. In Rochester, we're actually going to be the first pilot program of open hiring outside of Yonkers. So Mubarak, first of all, thank you so much for joining us and for helping bring this to Rochester.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
And I'm curious, again, many may have heard us, in the conscious capitalism community talking a little bit about this, but for those that aren't as familiar with open hiring, how the heck does something like that work? It sounds crazy to a lot of folks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so let me just give like a brief background of where it all started. So the founder of Greyston, Bernie Glassman, thought he had the belief that there was a way that businesses can make a positive impact in our communities and also benefit and continue to run business as needed. So he saw an issue with homelessness, there was an AIDS problem, there was a recidivism problem, and he noticed that people weren't reaching their full potential. And it wasn't that they didn't want to, it was just that people didn't have the opportunity. And so his goal was to give people that opportunity. So he began a small caking business. So Greyston actually began as a business making cakes, and now they, obviously, you mentioned, they make brownies. And what he was doing, he was pulling people off the streets to work in this bakery. So he was giving people these skills, and he was pulling them off the streets to begin working. This kind of started the open hiring process. It was a way that we were able to get people to work that didn't have opportunities to get to work. And often when we hear open hiring, and as I have been reaching out to some of the businesses here in Rochester, people immediately think that is geared specifically towards individuals that are returning from incarceration. This is anyone that doesn't have access to employment. I was speaking with a company in Netherlands that practices open hiring, and some of the stay-at-home moms that have never worked a day in their life, their kids have moved out, and now they're ready to get back into work. This has been beneficial for them. They're able to get to work. Individuals that are facing homelessness. I came from the Urban League, and we work with young people that didn't have a high school equivalency diploma. or a high school diploma. So we're able to get them to work. So this open hiring model, it's a radical idea, but I think it's radical in a cool type of way because it is getting people access to employment, access to work. And our CEO says open hiring is not for people looking to climb the career ladder. It's a way to help people find the ladder. And that's what our goal is to help people find that ladder and begin to get them put to work.
I love that. Yeah. Wow. Thank you. Thank you for kind of that overview. It's interesting to me because I was on one of your open hiring 101 webinars a few weeks back, and one of the things that kind of struck me in terms of, again, trying to make the business case, to business leaders who hopefully have a purposeful mindset, but also recognize they have to keep the lights on, is how much time and effort and energy and money is spent in the screening out process. And what if we reallocate that we usually screen people out through drug tests, through multiple interviews and any number of things. And what if we instead invested some of that money into actually making sure that they're successful in the roles that we put them in? And that reallocation is really interesting to me. So can you talk a little bit just briefly about some of the different barriers and obstacles that Greyston in open hiring, some of the support services that you help folks overcome?
Right. Yeah. So I think the interesting thing, and I'm excited that we're moving this to Rochester, and I was given the opportunity to take the reins and kind of lead the way. But it's exciting because Rochester, we're looking into a bunch of different industries. So we're at Greyston, obviously there's the bakery in Yonkers. We're looking into a number of industries here in Rochester. As some people may know, Clean Craft, which is one of the sponsors of this event today, has actually been practicing open hiring. And so open hiring model, the other beautiful thing about it is that we also work with other nonprofit agencies to provide what we call path making. So as individuals are going through the work process, we have someone that is on site to provide additional wraparound supportive services. A lot of the issues, it's not that people don't want to work. If someone is working 9 to 5 and they don't know where they're going to sleep tonight, that's really going to affect their ability to perform in the workplace. So those wraparound services are there to help people if they're having issues with homelessness, with transportation, mental health issues. And we also want to open up those services, not just for the frontline employees or the entry-level employees, but also the executive staff. And as I was transitioning into this role, COVID had an effect on many professional people. And so there was a need probably for a path maker, for someone, for these individuals to speak to. And so this path making is a key part of open hiring model. So we're not just putting people to work, we're putting them to work with the supportive services that they need so they're able to have success, they're able to retain employment. Because as I mentioned, and I'm sure Tina faces this as well with some of the young people she works with, is that it's the issues outside of work that have the ultimate effect on someone's ability to perform in the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and there's so much that I think some of us, especially those that may be business owners, that maybe you didn't have that experience, you don't know what that's like, and that's one of the ways, certainly Tina does, incredible work being able to work with folks, but you at Greyston, for those that may feel like they're not equipped to kind of do it on their own as Tina has, that's one of the ways that they can partner with you. So I just maybe give a quick pitch for those that may be interested in learning more, like what does it look like to start working with Greyston Open Hiring here in Rochester?
Yeah, so what it looks like is, so we do a lot with impact measurement as well. So that could be, if anyone listening has some businesses that may be interested in open hiring model, it's not something you need to jump into 100%. So let's just open up a few positions to kind of test it out. But we'll work with businesses to just see if, to determine their readiness to go into the open hiring model. As we finished that open hiring 101 session, we saw that some businesses were really interested in the path making. They weren't really ready to kind of jump on board with the open hiring model. And it may take some time. It is a drastic change from the hiring practices, and from conversations I've had with a number of people, they're saying, Rochester with their HR practices is very conservative. But it shouldn't intimidate anyone. I think this is, if we're really looking to give back to our community, open hiring is one way that we can remove some of those unconscious bias, those racist hiring practices, and put people to work. So we are here to support businesses kind of, again, gauge where they're at, if they're ready, and we'll work with them throughout the process to get them ready and acclimated to the open hiring model.
Thanks so much, Mubarak. So hopefully, again, just I want to underscore that, again, as the last panel of this conference, we hope that you are inspired to take some action. So whether that's in a larger company, and as Kim was mentioning, how to be more of an advocate, for your employees and for your industry to evolve its own practices towards a more just and equitable society. Whether that's, Tina being a social entrepreneur and figuring out how to integrate these practices into her business in terms of the populations that she's employing and giving folks a chance, or whether maybe for your business, it makes some sense to see what kinds of path making can happen through working with open hiring. I wanted to give one final example before turning it over to James Norman to talk about some of the things going on at Rmappy, because I wanted to also talk to Tom Bachmann at Paychex. He is the culture shaping master champion, has over 30 years of experience in training and leadership development, and is currently leading an enterprise-wide strategic initiative to help transform the company's culture into a collaborative and values-based environment that strengthens employee engagement while also driving that bottom line, results for the company. So Tom, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Andrew. A pleasure to be here. Thank you.
So you are a part of a larger organization, and sometimes, a smaller organization can be more agile, can be more nimble. But I think that the large organizations, when you do create some of these culture change initiatives, obviously just by the size and scale of the company, can have a tremendous impact. But there's no doubt that there's both intentional, conscious action that needs to happen, and also it needs to be a continued process. So I'd be curious, what kind of, not that it was ever by any means a bad culture, but what was it that inspired this more intentional focus and shift, to really focus on culture at Paychex?
Great question, Andrew. Really, it came down to Marty, our president and CEO, worked with our HROD vice president, Lori, and together they were thinking, we need to do something different. We were very successful, Paychex, as you know. Everybody in Rochester knows what Paychex is. And we were hitting our numbers. We were doing quite well. We did have values, of course, like accountability was a big deal for us and integrity was a big deal for us. But we needed to do something different. There was a traditional hierarchical model that most companies follow: shareholders first, then clients, and then employees. And we wanted to get back to what we knew our roots were, which was very employee focused. And so Marty and Lori knew that we needed to get back to a values-based organization to really focus on the employees, because we knew we just couldn't prove it. We didn't have the metrics to be able to prove it. And for a long time, I think boards of directors and presidents of organizations, they kind of know that people are the important caveat or the important piece of the pie, but they just really couldn't sell it. It was hard to be able to say, we need this monetary investment in people for us to be able to move forward. Well, we have those metrics now. In the last 10, 20 years, businesses have seen the ability to say, you know what, this is important. And so they went with their gut and they said, let's invest in people. So we started a values-based culture journey. And the foundation of that was to identify what are 6 things that we can really galvanize 16,000 people for. And so they astutely, and I think they made perfect choices. They chose integrity, partnership, accountability, respect, innovation, and service as the 6 foundational values that will bind all 16,000 people together. And what we discovered was that we needed a common language. We needed something that 16,000 people had in common. And it's hard to argue with accountability. It's hard to argue with integrity. They're table stakes types of values. No matter what your personal values are, I think everybody can understand that integrity is kind of a big deal. So we started on this journey to reinforce those values. And how do we go about doing that? So we went about these things called culture concepts that we started educating the rest of the organization in. Stuff like being present and being here now, and starting from curious, and managing the stories that you tell yourselves, the filters that we have, and the unconscious and conscious biases that we have. So that started making a huge impression, and we started seeing some volunteers in the organization that wanted to become more of that. So it became kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. We wanted to focus on people, and in so doing, the people spoke. So we certainly needed senior leadership's assistance. It had to start from the top, and Marty knew it. So every week, every month, he leads his executive team meeting with a culture conversation, something that is focused around a particular value or a culture concept. And it's reinforced with his vice presidents, the executive board, and all of the directors, managers, senior managers, and supervisors. So everywhere around the country and internationally as well, we're seeing teams take that baton and say, you know what, this is important. This is worth our time. If we spend 15 minutes, a half hour, an hour on what it means to be integral with your word, with your thoughts, with your actions, how important is it to ask the question, what more can I do? And we're seeing this little wave in the last 8 years or so, certainly exponential in the last couple of years. Now we're seeing it turn towards communities and turn towards individuals and their families. We're seeing locations from coast to coast and also internationally really focus on community service. People taking their own time, whether it's on weekends, evenings, during, maybe it's community drives to be able to help solve problems, or hurricanes. When we had the hurricanes down in Texas and Louisiana, there was a huge corporate response for that. And I think it's because we're becoming more employee and people minded. It's not just about the business anymore. We really do feel, and there's this old saying by Peter Drucker that culture eats strategy for breakfast, and we really do believe that. It's not necessarily about the products or the strategies. It really comes down to, do we trust each other? Are we connected to each other? Are we engaged? Are we going to be excellent partners? The last 2 years, we've really taken that up, and justifiably so. It was a huge missing piece for us. 2 years ago, we hired an inclusion and diversity manager. Her name's Dr. Deanna Kimbrough. She's my partner at work. She's a wonderful human being, wonderful person, and in just 2 short years has made a huge impact in the organization in terms of our focus on inclusion, which is something that clearly is very important, has been important for centuries, but it's certainly our focus right now, and we want to become better, faster, stronger versions of ourselves. Not just for 1 or 2 people or a dozen people, but how can 16,000 people really relate and connect to each other? So together, I think what we're seeing is a huge evolution of our organization from being a darling of Rochester, so to speak, from a capitalistic standpoint, to one that is very people-minded, very community-minded, very socially minded. And I think what we're seeing is everybody's getting it, so to speak.
I have a personal affinity for that word evolution because I think that is, especially at a large organization, just so important. I think that large organizations can become overwhelmed by the journey, and it sounds like, you know, for you all, you started, you know, you eat an elephant one bite at a time. You know, you take a little bit at a time, and now you're expanding that. You're more deeply integrating it, and I think that sometimes organizations get you know, they see the journey ahead and they get too afraid to start. So I'd be curious, couple things. One is, what has been kind of the impact on the organization? You know, it just kind of in your intro, it says a little bit about how it's supposed to be values-based and also strengthening employee engagement and driving bottom line results. Is it too early yet, or have you seen any kind of impacts on turnover, retention, you know, engagement, any of those kind of metrics that are more the traditional business metrics?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the greatest example is in the last 4 months. We had good engagement scores, and they were improving every year, certainly in the last 6 or 7 years. We've seen people more connected, more involved with each other. We've seen partnerships significantly improve. Our sales and our service teams, which I've been with the company for 20 years, and there was a time when sales didn't speak to service and service didn't speak to sales all that much. I mean, we partnered because we had to, but now we partner because we want to. We know it's the right thing to do, and we've discovered in that way that it's hey, there's also money to be made if we partner too. So it's not only good for the company, but it's good for each other, and we're seeing that retention significantly increase. Turnover has made better strides in the last 5 years than I've ever seen it in the 20 years that I've seen in the organization. And I think that's a big part of it is the engagement and the partnerships that we have between sales and service service and IT and finance, all the different organizations are now integrated. And when we know each other's stories, when we take the time, such as what Tina was talking about and what Mubarak was talking about in terms of the backgrounds and really focusing on the individuals, we're seeing that as well. When people are connected, they trust each other, there's more engagement. So mathematically, statistically, we're seeing that as well. Certainly in the last 4 months, our engagement scores went up, 15 points? I think high 70s to mid 90s, mid to low 90s, just in the last 4 months. Part of that, I think, is because of our ability to communicate and talk to each other. And I think part of it is also crisis, obviously. Crisis brings people together. But I also think that there was a strong foundation there to begin with. I think people already knew that integrity was a big deal and that respect was a big deal, and that if we're going to survive, and not only survive, but thrive in this organization and be able to serve our clients, we have to take care of each other. And what I saw in March and April was a significant increase in the level of communication from peer to peer, team to team, department to department. It was extraordinary. So we do have the stats that say that engagement has gone up significantly. Retention has gone up significantly. Our turnover rate is probably, I don't want to quote the number, I'll just say significantly, because I am faithful that that number is significant, especially on the sales side. We've really seen some great movement on how well our sales teams have done. And we've just seen some recent news on that as well. In this extraordinary time of the last 4 months, our sales teams have really reorganized and stuck together like we've never seen before. And we've seen some really great results, especially in certain departments of our sales teams as well. It's been very gratifying.
Yeah, it's an exciting story to hear, and really just each one of these stories so far just really a testament to the potential. When you do think long term, you do think about all stakeholders. You do especially want to prioritize the well-being of your employees and the communities that you're a part of. And so we talked about some larger companies, some smaller companies. I do want to turn it over now to James Norman. And so Mr. Norman, he retired as president and CEO of Action for a Better Community after serving that position for more than 25 years. And in 2013, actually authored a chapter on structural inequality for a book put out by the Rochester Area Community Foundation called the State of Black Rochester 2013, Education plus Equity equals Employment, which made him a great person to lead the Rochester Monroe Anti-Poverty Initiative Steering Committee Employment Working Group, co-chair, because that's really what we're here, for today is how can we take action and move towards that direction. So Mr. Norman, James, thank you so much for joining us here today. I did want to just kind of ask you a little bit about, because I know that part of what you've been working on with Rmappy is really around a pledge that employers can make a public declaration, beyond just the kind of words of support that can sometimes feel a little bit empty, that can actually be towards more being anti-racist, being more just and equitable in their practices for their employees in the community. So can you tell us a little bit about kind of that intended purpose and that vision for the Rmappy pledge?
Sure. Good afternoon to everyone. I am happy to be a part of this panel. I'll just give a little context first. The Rochester Monroe Anti-Poverty Initiative started in 2015. It was a declaration by Governor Cuomo that identified Rochester as the first of what's called the Espy cities, Empire State Poverty Reduction Initiative cities. And we were first because of our horrible poverty statistics. When we compare ourselves to other urban communities in the state, and we compare ourselves to comparable cities throughout the United States, we don't rank very well. We rank very high as far as people in poverty. There are several working groups under Rmappy, and I co-chair the employment working group. Essentially, our goal, our objective is to help people get employment and help people to thrive in employment. That's our goal. And we have the working group is composed of people from community-based organizations, from training institutions, from educational institutions and employers, of course. And I would mention that one of our panelists, Mubarak, is a part of the employment working group. The working group has three areas it works on. First is best practices. Second is what we call workforce demand information. And thirdly is wage enhancement. So today I'm talking about the best practices piece. How we came to develop the best practices is a result of many meetings over particularly 2019, the year 2019, where we would have focus group discussions about what are the issues that cause unemployment, what are the issues that feed into the lack of connection between employers and particularly community-based organizations that are referring people for work. So if you think about the employers as the demand side, and you think about the community-based organizations or workforce preparation organizations as being the supply side, the goal was to figure out how do we get these two sides connected in a more effective way, because we always hear that there are jobs that are available, but there aren't enough people or qualified people to fill them. So as we had those discussions, many themes came out over and over again. People would say that sometimes employers have requirements for positions that are above what is required. We would hear that employers are necessarily prepared to deal with barriers that some of their employees might face in getting the work and maintaining their employment. We would hear that some of the community-based organizations do a good job, some don't do a job as well as others. Maybe some do very detailed screening, some just really collect an application and send anybody to any job opening. And so we looked at that and we created a list of those issues and did some research as well and created what we call the employer pledge and the workforce preparation organization pledge. So two different companion pledges, which are the opposites of the list of problems that we identified. Those pledges can be found on the website endingpovertynow.org, endingpovertynow.org. It's important to put the now there because if you just put ending poverty, you'll get a lot of different things. Anyway, the employer pledge has 8 best practices arrayed across 4 different areas: workforce culture, hiring, retention, and promotion. The WPO pledge has 7 best practices arrayed across workforce culture, what we call program elements, which is what are the service elements they provide, employer relationships, and retention and success. And if someone is interested in signing one of those pledges, they can go to endingpovertynow.org. And if you go on that website, first thing you'll see is some stats. Then under featured items, you'll see on the lower left side, the pledge. And then there's a section for the employer pledge and a section for the workforce preparation organizations pledges. Behind each of those best practices are a series of examples of what it means to follow a best practice. So, and in both cases, that's the way it works. When a person or an organization signs the pledge, we ask minimally that they identify one thing they're going to work on for the next several months. So that's the one part of the pledge. The second part is our commitment to provide technical assistance and education for those that are challenged to work toward whatever goal they have identified. The third part of the whole process is the celebration piece. So on August the 27th, there's going to be a recognition ceremony for those who've signed the pledge. And subsequently, we'll be listing the signers of the pledge on the endingpovertynow.org website. Back up on August the 20th, we have our first education session, and this session is generated by what a lot of the different pledge signers identified as a need. And so we're going to talk about bias in the talent cycle. So we have a panel of people that will talk about that. And so that's pretty much the pledge process.
Perfect. So it sounds like in addition to just, signing the pledge and wanting to make a difference, there's also an intention for some support and some sharing of best practices and really some ways to create a learning community around that. Is that right?
That's exactly correct, because some of the pledge signers have identified for us where they think their strengths are. And so we're communicating that to others that connect to whatever strength they say they have. And so we're trying to create learning communities by connecting the needs and the resources per se.
Perfect. And then kind of one question I have is, I know that this is in the earlier stages, trying to make a splash, get a big kickoff, welcome and encourage those that have signed it with the celebration that you mentioned. What kind of have you seen so far in terms of adoption? Are there any barriers that you're noticing, or any ways that the business community can or should get more involved?
Well, we've gotten some feedback from those who've signed so far, and I would like to mention that Imprintable Solutions is one of our signers. Tina, appreciate that. Some feedback we've gotten is that people have thought about implementing something called a cultural competency certificate. Some people have started to systematically review who applies, who is hired, who is promoted from a equity lens. Some people have implemented implicit bias training for their search committees. And one company has indicated they've hired an inclusion specialist trainer. Another company indicated they are re-examining the degree requirements for some of their corporate positions. Another organization said they're doing a 60-day or 30-day, 60-day, and 90-day check on the retention for new employees. So those are some of the things people are doing. As far as barriers to getting people to sign, I think one of the barriers is just getting the information out more effectively than we have. In some cases, we've had some reluctance on employers' parts who fear that there may be some negative repercussions if they were to sign the pledge and not be successful, which is not the case. It's all about making that effort and getting support and trying to do the right thing. And in other cases, some organizations have said, well, we're already doing all these things. Why do we need to sign a pledge? And in that case, our response is that if you are already leading in this arena, we need it to be made known to others so that they can follow your path and be a part of trying to improve the connection and coordination between the employee community and the supply community.
That's perfect. Yeah, I think that's certainly something in a broad sense we try to do with conscious capitalism in our chapters is that sharing of best practices, that inspiration. We're not solely focused, although it's obviously a huge important part on that the anti-racism discussion. So really grateful to have you all as a partner and really a collaborator here in Rochester to be able to really focus on sharing those best practices, because I do think it is important. And even for those who may feel like they are more successful, what better way than to share those best practices and lift other organizations up so that we can collectively as a community have more of an impact. So thank you for all of those coordinating efforts. I know that it's a heavy lift.
Thank you.
One question I wanted to kind of pose broadly to the panel. This one is from Ram Srivastava from Larson Engineers. He's been a long time member and contributor to Conscious Capitalism. Talks a little bit about climate smart solutions. Anything that you've done to save energy, water, waste, shift renewable resource, solar power. I know that healing the environment is a part of the healing organization discussion. I also know that oftentimes climate impacts disproportionately affect people of color, people in low-income communities, just in terms of where certain toxic waste sites get even. So there's definitely an intersection of sustainability and social justice. And I was wondering if, especially in this time, it's even more difficult sometimes when we're trying to stay healthy and, maybe trying to balance that sustainability with, keeping everybody healthy and safe during COVID. Have there been any environmental practices for any of you in terms of the ways that you're trying to, be healing organizations? All right, go for it, Kim.
Well, as I said, we have 19 different sites, and a number of our buildings are older facilities. And so we've been going through and trying to retrofit our facilities to be more energy conscious, more environmentally friendly. In addition to that, we have a food service business that does 2.5 million meals a year, including supplying food to programs in our area, including the food bank. And so we also participate as part of New York State's large volume recycling for all of the food waste and organic waste. And these are small things that we're doing, but we feel that they're important things that we can be doing as we, to your point, Andrew, are evolving in our thinking and how we can reduce our carbon footprint and be a better steward of our climate and our environment.
Thanks, Kim. Yeah, go for it, Mubarak.
Yeah, so I just was going to mention we had a call yesterday with a business that does solar energy. So something that we're looking to get into. He's looking to diversify his workforce, and a big key part of that discussion was just the lack of knowledge about solar energy. So I think just educating people about solar energy is one way that will continue. I mean, if we do like trainings for people in the community, just educating them on solar energy and how that's beneficial. So that's just one way that we just had a discussion yesterday. So not only getting people employed, but also, the education part of solar energy.
Perfect, thank you. And we've got a follow up, just a comment, Kim, from Ram that says there's all kinds of grants available to implement those kinds of projects. So encouraging you to go for it. So thanks, Ram, for always keeping that top of mind. And this is, as I mentioned, the last of our panels of this virtual conference. It's weekly, but we'll still be going back to doing our monthly meetings after this and having that sustainability focus and really planning a few topics coming up on that as well. I think that's a huge part of how we can build back better is to build back more sustainably. I also saw one question that was going on. It was directed at Mubarak, kind of around hiring veterans, and he talked to Brock, who is a founder of Local Hero. That's a charitable organization that helps to support vets and anyone that has gone through extreme situations in life and trying to get their lives back. Does some coaching and job coaching for them. I know that Mubarak answered him in the chat around being able definitely to serve some of those needs. Is there anybody else in their organizations who does any work supporting vets or knows of anything along those lines for Brock? All right, Brock, I think, Tom's got one. All right.
Mute. In terms of the specifics, we have a particular group. It's a veterans group, like a conversation group. A bunch of us. I'm a veteran myself. There's about 30 or 40 that belong to a particular group that every month we get together and we talk about how we can reach out, how we can celebrate different veteran opportunities, and how can we bring more awareness to not only veterans but current armed forces military. I know that they make an impact on corporate decisions to be able to create some kind of giving in that regard. The details of that I do not know because I'm new to that particular group. It was just newly formed within the last year or two. But I know that we are moving the needle in terms of our awareness and support of veterans.
Glad to hear that, Tom. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Definitely important. Another important thing to keep in mind. So thanks for your advocacy on that, Brock, and hopefully we've got a few connections and follow-ups to make for all the folks that you're working with. So I know that somehow we're already coming up close to time. I wanted to give everybody on the panel one last go around because one of the things, especially as we are rounding out this conference, trying to have a case study focused panel. I think you saw a lot of different case studies of healing organizations. Hopefully give you a little bit of extra incentive, but also some actionable steps that you could take in terms of moving forward from this virtual conference to actually starting that evolutionary path for your own organization. But I'd love to hear from each one of our panelists, just maybe a quick minute or two on what it is. We talked about how this can impact the bottom line in a positive way. Certainly it's having a positive impact on communities as well. Hopefully on the environment too, in terms of some of the things Ram was mentioning. But what is it that you think in your experience of working with other businesses that keeps more businesses from adopting more of this conscious capitalism mindset or tries to pursue becoming a healing organization? And then what would you say to them? How would you try to convince them that this is a path worth pursuing, both for their organization and for their community and all of their stakeholders, really for that win-win-win? All right, Tina.
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest things might be fear of the unknown. So we're not familiar with something, it looks good, but we're going, oh, but this, but that, but the other. We have a lot of buts in our sayings sometimes, which aggravates me. But anyway, regardless, outside of that fear of unknown, don't be afraid to pick up the phone and make a phone call and come into an organization like mine, or go have a conversation with Clean Craft, go have a conversation with the vice president over at Wonder Windows, go have a conversation with Greyston Industries, and actually dive in and see what that looks like and that feels like, and ask those questions that internally you're sitting there going, I might be uncomfortable asking that, but you need to ask the question. And any one of us that are practicing conscious capitalism or a social enterprise, we will answer you honestly, right? Because there is that fear of the unknown. And once you experience it and you come into it and you feel the energy around it, and you see the things that are actually happening and the strides that are being made, not just the profitability piece, but the community piece as well. It's really powerful. I would say it's a very powerful experience, and I would encourage anybody who is even thinking about reevaluating how they're doing things. Pick up the phone, send an email, send a message. Any one of us is more than happy, I'm sure, to put our hands up and say, hey, yeah, absolutely, let's have that conversation to show you what it looks like, so that you can squelch some of that fear.
Thanks so much, Tina. I know I have seen how some of that sharing and some of that overcoming and the coaching that you've been willing to do for other organizations in town. So thank you, of course, for leading by example, and also for coaching others to follow in your footsteps.
Thank you.
All right, James, what do you got for us?
I think that some organizations really don't, have a feeling that they need to improve. Once they establish routine, they just want to continue to do what they're doing, even though they realize that things are changing. They want to continue what they're doing. I think in some other cases, there are people that still buy into some of the stereotypes about different racial ethnic groups in terms of their work ethic and so forth. So what I'll say to them is that if they want to thrive in going into the future, that it's important that they get on board and diversify the workforce and diversify opportunity. And if I could advise on something they would read, I would ask them to read the book I just finished reading, Economic Dignity by Gene Sperling, which really talks about the fundamental need for employment to provide dignified opportunities so people can support themselves and their families and their communities.
Thank you for that. I'm always up for a book recommendation, and I think that is important. I think opened with a little bit, just there's so many more people that are being more conscious with the ways that they're spending their dollars. Voting with their spending dollars. More people are trying to invest in companies that are making a positive social impact, and I couldn't agree more. That is the way things are going, and hopefully we'll only see this movement continue to increase. So thank you for all that you're doing, and certainly look forward to the future impacts of all of those companies making the pledge for Rmappy and all of the learnings and best practices to come from that. I think I saw your hand up as well, Tom.
Yeah, I wanted to add one last thought too in the answer to your question about what can people do to get moving forward. For us, it was two different things. One, it was senior leadership support. We couldn't do it unless we had senior leadership, the entire executive committee, the president of the organization saying this is important. And not only just once, but continuing to live those values and support it on a regular basis and be accountable to that. The second ingredient by far is the volunteer spirit, because once many of our employees saw that, okay, this is something senior leadership is serious about and is invested in, I want to get into, this is important to me, and I know that it's going to move forward because they're not going to be fickle and change their mind next month and do something that's leadership du jour 6 months later. This is a journey, a path that we've been on for 8 years now. So we're seeing an exponential increase in the number of volunteers. We call them culture champions. These people already have day jobs. They have their job at Paychex. They do what they do. But in addition to that, they want to see the organization be better version of itself tomorrow than it was the day before. So they take time out of their day. They talk to each other. They create engagement activities. The level of communication has gone up easily 3 times, certainly in the last 4 months, especially in the last 2-3 years or so. So we have 1,268 champions in the company right now, which is 8% of the entire company are all volunteers trying to move that culture needle forward so that everybody can live in an organization or work in an organization where they do feel safe, where they do feel engaged, where they do feel part of something greater than just what their specific singular function at work is. They do consider it a family, and I think there's a big groundswell for that, and it's continuing.
That's perfect. Yeah, I think it is so important to be a top-down and a bottom-up process. You need that buy-in from the top, but also you want it to be that grassroots support. So it's exciting to see that that's happening. What about for you, Kim?
Yeah, I would say briefly in my book, I talk about pragmatic altruism, which is simply doing good is good business. And I think a lot of the business leaders I speak to feel that this is not central to their mission, or this will cost money that they don't have. But what I always counter with is, as we look at the workforce changes and having 5 generations in our workforce here at Loretto, what we know is incredibly important to millennials, Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z, is being part of something larger than themselves. And I think what is always larger than yourself is being part of a social justice culture, a culture where every voice is heard and valued, each person is respected. And so I always counter with that. I think it helps with employee retention. I think it helps with attraction. And we have a very, very robust team of great, smart, young minds, young leaders here at Loretto. And I think that that's because that's a stake in the ground that we've placed there as an organization.
That's a great point. More and more folks, as well as being conscious consumers, conscious investors, they want to have an impact if they're going to be spending 40, 50 plus hours at work, they want to have a positive impact. And I'm encouraged always to see the young people always leading that charge. You know, new generations always really eager for that. So thank you. And I'm glad that you're seeing that as well.
So I am going to piggyback of what Tina said. There's that hesitancy or the fear from organizations, especially moving into something like open hiring. So I would say, look at Greyston. Greyston has been doing this since the early 80s, and it really hasn't affected business. Actually, business has been booming with the bakery, and the benefit is we're able to put people to work. Those people are able to pay rent, spend money in the community that comes back into the community. So that's one of the win-win situations that we were discussing. Then there's been a lot of social injustice and a lot of businesses making pledges of the work that they're going to do. So I just feel like often if something doesn't affect us, it is kind of out of sight, out of mind, and that's unfortunate. So we talked about the founder of Greyston, who saw the issues with poverty, with the homelessness, and these issues. There are a lot of organizations in Rochester that are working to alleviate these issues. So I would say, as business leaders, we need to look at the issues that are affecting our community. If you are from Rochester, this is affecting you no matter what, because this is our community, and you should make it an effort to work with these organizations that are doing the work, and ensuring that we're able to make sure these injustices are not just affecting certain groups of people, but we're making effective change in our community. So I think it's a responsibility of businesses. And like I said, the organizations are out there. There's Greyston, there's Rmappy that's doing the work, Tina's doing a lot of the work, Urban League, ABC. So just reach out, and we're always willing to work and partner to make sure we're able to put people to work.
Thank you so much. And sorry, I've got a torrential downpour going on here, so hopefully you can still hear me at least a little bit. But I am so grateful to each one of you for your time today, but far more importantly, for the work that you're doing each and every day. We at Conscious Capitalism really try to create this learning community of sharing best practices. So I appreciate each of you sharing. I appreciate James and all that you're doing to create a learning community, and Mubarak, all the things that you're adding on. Tina, you mentioned being so willing to talk to people who might want to adopt some of these practices themselves. Kim talking about the ways that we can really advocate for our communities, advocate for our industries, and Tom really giving even the large businesses a pathway forward. So hopefully each one of you might have learned something to take back to your organizations. And as I mentioned, this is being recorded, so some of you may be watching this later on, and or hopefully if you're watching now, maybe find this worthy of sharing. So please do share with other folks that might have something to learn. Continue to build this conscious capitalism movement. And thanks to all of everyone who joined us today. And we hope to see you on for a future call. We'll be doing these monthly now that our virtual conference is over. Thanks so much to all of our panelists, all of our attendees throughout this, as well as our sponsors. Deeply grateful, and hope that each of you has something to take away in terms of evolving your own organizations. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.